Hello, and welcome to Big Bang Radio Spotlights. This is a show where we talk to independent artists from all around the world all about their music and their process for making it. I'm your host, Nouran, and today I got to talk to Fish from the band Bad Camper. Without any further ado, here's the interview. Fish, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it for you joining us today. I'm going to first ask and say, how would you describe the music that you typically create?
I describe it a lot of different ways because it goes kind of all over the board, but the most concise way that I've heard it described by others is we sort of have the pop vocal sensibilities of bands like Panic at the Disco, but the instrumentals sound like everything from Sublime to the Lumineers, but mostly in the genre of like Young the Giant, The Head and the Heart, and that sort of like indie pop genre. And then we got our guitar player Jordy. He brings in the shredding of sort of early Portugal the Man or other sort of like alt rock guitar solos. So it's kind of all over the board.
Awesome. And it says that you grew up in a musical family. Could you tell us exactly how did the environment shape your musical mind?
Oh man, I mean, now looking back, it's everything. You know, my folks, they never pressured me into doing music, but music was always around. You know, my dad was always playing guitar. My grandfather was always playing piano, and they had me in front of a kid's keyboard, jumping and dancing around when I was 2 years old, and I feel like that makes the whole difference. And now looking back, I'm a music teacher. That's what it's all about, is getting kids excited about it. And look at, you know, now 20 something years later, it's my whole life because I always associate it with something fun. And so that's what it's always been for me, is just something fun that I love to do. So it really did impact me years later.
So is that also when you realized you had passion for music around that time?
Well, actually, no, it took a lot longer. And I think this happens with a lot of people where, you know, I picked up an instrument. I did band in school. You know, I played drums. I was like, yeah, I want to play drums and be a rock star. I love the idea of that. But I really wasn't that good at it. And I sort of was just kind of average, kind of like trying to catch up, last in the class. And then in high school, I was still just sort of, you know, doing it for fun. I was maybe playing in a band or two, just sort of like, you know, not really serious about it. And then actually the sort of compositional music theory side, I took a music theory class, and that side of it got me. I was like, wait, there's this whole world of music that I don't know about, scales and chords and stuff. And that's what really got me excited about it. And then I went on to study it in college, and I did my master's degree as well, just because something about the inner workings of it really got me excited.
That's really good. Like having an education in that field, that's really, really awesome. So I imagine that beside your family, I imagine they inspired you into music. But who inspired you mostly in the music world to become a musician?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, it's definitely has come across a lot of different people from year to year. But I think, to put it into like a succinct answer, I've seen wow, that's such an interesting question because I don't think about it as like one person, but there's this idea of like there's been a couple local bands that I've always looked up to. One of them being a band called The Matches, which was an Oakland-based band that was like the punk band that was super big when I was in high school. And I remember just being like, wow, one day I want to like play at this concert hall and like be a rock star. And there's some other bands as well. One of the bands I got to play in, and I met the guys and like became friends with them. And that really inspired me because they were, you know, 10 years older than me. And I was going, man, I can't wait to do this one day. And that band was called K Sarah. And there were some other bands that I wasn't necessarily as close to, but I sort of saw them, you know, three steps ahead of me, and they were always really inspiring for me. And I look back now, and it's really cool as a young musician to see, wow, this is just some other guy from where I grew up. He's not special. He is having fun and doing what makes him happy. And look, there they are doing something really cool. So it's kind of like local musicians that really inspired me.
And when it comes to being an artist and a musician, what would you say is your favorite aspect of being an artist and a musician?
There's a lot of them, but the reason that I became a musician and the reason that I am really just working so hard every day at this is because at one point I was like, well, what do I want to do with what do I want to spend my rest of my life doing? And I was like, well, I really like to travel. I was like, I really like to write music and I really like to meet people. And I was like, well, why don't I just do that? Like, I'm gonna write music, I'm gonna travel and share that music with people. And so that's my favorite part. And in 2017, I hopped on a bicycle and biked across the USA and across a lot of Western Europe. And I had my guitar with me. I wrote most of the songs from our debut album, What You Love Comes Along. And after that, I was like, I want to do this. Like, this is so much fun to just travel, share music, enjoy life, and then hopefully try to make my living doing it at the same time. So this last year, I bought a van and put a bed in it and turned it into a little house, and I'm trying to do it full time now. So
Yeah, all the things you just said all falls in one category of being an artist, traveling, going places, seeing people. That's a huge part of it. I want to talk a little bit about your band, Bad Camper. So tell us, how did the band, how did it start?
yeah, well, the bike ride kind of started it all. I spent the winter at the Standing Rock reservation where there was the Dakota Access Pipeline was being protested in 2016, and my whole life got flipped upside down, and I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing working this suburban job? I have so much more that I care about with the world, and so much more I feel like I owe to the world to share. And so I got on the bike and I wrote the whole album basically, What You Love Comes Along, while I was biking, and I spent 9 months just writing music and camping on the side of the road, meeting people, sort of doing bad camping as I call it now, just sort of enjoying life. National parks everywhere from California through Colorado up to Boston, and I've done a couple of trips like that since on the West Coast. And basically when I returned from that first initial trip in the end of 2017, I got together with some longtime friends from high school, and we sat down and sort of started jamming, working on the songs. And then we brought them to our producer and good friend, David Lips. And between all of us, we wrote this album. And right when we sort of started finishing recording the album and we're like ready to play our first concert, COVID hit. So it's been a crazy roller coaster for us, but we now have sort of solidified our lineup. We have three main members, Jordy, Celia, and I, that all sort of work together, and we're actually working on a new record. So that's where we're sort of finally becoming a concrete object. But it all started with that bike trip.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I want to talk a little bit about your album, the What You Love Comes Along. Could you tell us the inspiration behind coming up with the title of this album?
Yeah, totally. The title comes from what my favorite song from the album, which is "We Wait," and "We Wait" is all about, and really the whole album is about how you know, we spend our whole lives, and in my case, we travel the world to go find something that really means something to us, and to find our love or our passion or our place where we want to live and set roots down. And really, whether you have to travel around the world or whether you never leave your hometown, we all go through that sort of coming of age experience where we sort of try to figure out what we're all about and who we are. And for me, that meant a year of biking around. But in the end, what I realized and what I think a lot of people can relate to is that you can go as far as you want. You can go all the way to China and back, and no matter what, the family, the friends, the loved ones that you grew up with that are in your heart, those things will never leave you, and they'll always inform your journeys and your experiences and your choices. And so even if you end up around the world, you'll always be connected back to your home, which is somewhere inside of your heart. For me, it's in California where my family's from, but so that's kind of the idea, is wherever you go, what you love will come along.
So, what would you say is your favorite track in the album?
Well, besides "We Wait," which is kind of a slower, more like acoustic guitar picking track that then like crescendos at the end with the whole band. My favorite track that I think people, I've had different fans and different friends say, "Oh, I like this track. I like this track." But the one that still means the most to me, and I feel like has the most poetry and the most depth to it, is the last track on the album, which is called "Watch It Grow," and it sort of sums up the whole album and the whole experience of that I was just explaining about traveling and coming to those realizations about where where your love truly lies.
It's to you how I never wanted to lose. Our castle built in reverse. Normally floors come first, but you taught me how to improve. And I know it's the only way. It never gets old. Dreaming till the morning ends. And we never get old. Our dreams won't just be plans.
And I know performing right now is very, very hard. But before the pandemic happened, when you're performing, do you typically like get an anxiety before you get on stage?
I am so bad, and it's not even before I get on stage; it's the whole time. I've performed a lot. I've done classical music and rock and everything in between, and especially when I'm singing and I'm the one connecting verbally with the audience, it definitely adds a lot of pressure. And I've been known to rush through songs, and I've been known to stumble over my words, but I've been getting a lot better at it. I think like anything else, practice makes perfect, and for me, it's just a matter of realizing that no one cares. Everyone accepts you for who you are and loves it, and everyone's having a good time. And the only person that's putting any pressure on me is me. So yes, I'm chronically very stage fright ridden, but I'm getting over it. I don't care anymore.
So when it comes to music, the music industry, I know the music industry is can be very difficult, can be very stressful because it's a very, very like challenging career. If you could change one thing about the music industry, what would it be?
I guess one thing that's sort of frustrating that I feel like really undermines a lot of really talented artists is that, I mean, you could say this about any industry, but with music it's particularly disheartening because there are some amazing musicians out there, like the best, and they write music, and and maybe this musician would write the perfect music for you, and this other guy on this end of the world would write the perfect music that I would just love, and we're never gonna hear about them. It's so saturated right now, the music industry. Anybody can go make a recording, put it on Spotify. It's hard to get to it, and that's not an issue. I mean, it's great that everyone can make music now. The issue is that it's the people that have a lot of money are the ones that you're hearing. Like, just because you're rich doesn't mean your music is going to touch my soul. And so I guess the change that I would make is that I would wish that there'd be some kind of like almost like socialist aspect to the music industry. Like, oh, like, hey, wait a minute, this music is objectively like really good. Like this person has worked really hard. Like, let's raise them up somehow. And that's the cool thing about social media is that you can pretty much be unknown and be discovered. But just with all the money and major label and all the marketing, there's a lot of stuff that I do not want to hear that is being promoted. And so I guess it's, money corrupts. So it's a problem with all of the industries in our society. But with music, it's particularly sad because there's some kids in their bedrooms that deserve, as much recognition as the next big pop star or whatever. So.
Before we go, what accomplishments do you see yourself achieving in the next 5 to 10 years from now?
That's a good question. I mean, the biggest thing for me that I look at as like a really concrete goal in my music career and in my life in general is being able to support myself with stuff that I love. I teach music lessons right now, which I love. And I also, and I do that on Zoom and everything with the pandemic. And ideally in the next 5, 10 years, I will have a music studio that I'm not shoveling rent into that I own, right? That I can house, a couple different musicians at a time at, so that we can have sort of a band house, and we have a music studio there. And in that music studio lodging area, we're able to create new music, do live streams, put on concerts, and sort of make our living through our music, as opposed to every single one of us working side jobs. Right now, our guitarist is doing this job, I'm doing this job, and everyone's sort of trying to make ends meet. And it's fine, it works, but it doesn't let us completely focus on the music. And for me, that's the goal, is to be able to support myself enough so that I can just devote 100 hours a week to working on music, as opposed to splitting my attention with all this other stuff and worrying about money and all that stuff. So I don't want to be rich and famous. I just want to not be broke.
Oh, I really do wish you best of luck on that. These are like amazing goals. Last thing before we go, where can our listeners find you and your music?
So on our website, badcamper.org, we just launched a whole new fundraiser for our second album, and you can also subscribe to be a patron of our music there, which gets you access to all this really cool stuff and gets you chats with us and cover requests. So check out badcamper.org, and you'll find all of our old music there, and we're slowly starting to pile up our new album there over the next couple months. So that'll be all available pretty soon here in spring and summer 2021.
Thanks to Fish for sitting down with us and talking all about Bad Camper's music. If you want to see more interviews just like this, you can go to facebook.com/Studio67NCC, youtube.com/NashCom College, or you can find us on Instagram at Studio67NCC. Thank you all for watching. I'm Nouran Shaban, and remember to stay positive.